Human trafficking is one of the most horrific crimes committed against fellow human beings. Unlike a burglary, from which you can eventually recover day after day, month after month, they are victimized over and over again. Nancy Hartwell became fascinated and horrified by this crime when a German acquaintance disappeared, and it later became known that she had been sold into a sultan's harem. She began collecting stories which showed definite patterns. Harem Slave is the first book in the human trafficking series, which takes a frank look and disturbing look at how victims of this crime spend their lives. Nancy grew up in Tampa, studied international relations in Washington, and married a distinguished attorney from Cameroon, where she lived for 14 years. She's traveled to 44 countries and can get thoroughly into trouble in more than 20 languages. She published her first poem in a national magazine at age 8, has had radio plays produced on the BBC and the ORTF in French, and has published a number of articles on international trade. For 7 years, she was the technical writer for a division of the Washington Post that tracked Congress, and for 14 was editor and lead proposal writer for a company specialized in international development. She loves traveling, learning languages, Egyptology, and cooking, and is especially devoted to working in the area of human trafficking awareness. It gives us a great deal of pleasure here on Revealing the Truth. Please welcome Nancy Hartwell to our program. Hello, Nancy, how are you?
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to help get the word out.
Well, Nancy, you authored several books, The Harem Slave being one of them, and I want to direct our audience to our website, ianbn.com, and if you'll check out the books and media section, you'll find a link to Harem Slave, and that will take you to Nancy Hartwell's Amazon page, and there you will find the rest of her books. Nancy, we've taken today in honor of National Human Traffic Awareness Month or week, and this Wednesday being the day in which organizations around the country are going to be gathering to talk and bring exposure to this issue. In my opening comments about the program, I gave some of the statistics which are so staggering and earth-shattering as to how many young children, men and women both, are pulled into both sex trafficking, labor trafficking, or labor slavery. And you've approached this from a rather unique way, and that is through your books, The Harem Slave, kind of walking people through this experience. What was it that prompted you, with this vast career, married to a man from Cameroon, traveling the world as you did, what was your wake-up call? What was your epiphany that really caused you to become an advocate in the area of uncovering human trafficking?
Well, as you mentioned in the intro, I had a German friend named Ursula who just disappeared one day. They found her bicycle next to the road, and nobody has heard from her or seen her since. And it later was rumored that she had been sold into the harem of a sultan in Libya. That spooked me really bad because 40 years ago, I was a pretty good-looking blue-eyed blonde myself, and I thought, holy Toledo, that could have been me. And I started collecting stories, and the stories began to really accumulate, and once people know that you're interested in this topic, you get bombarded with stories. And I finally had time to sit down and write 3 books about the victims of this crime and the lives that they actually lead. These books are based on true stories, and that's, I think, what makes them, first of all, so scary, and second of all, so powerful, is because they are really based on true stories. Now, I need to caution you, you can't talk about the life of a sex slave without saying certain things out loud. So they do contain adult material. But if you're looking for pornography, you're going to be really disappointed.
You've written 3 books, one entitled Voices from the Harem, one entitled Prince Ibrahim's Favorite, and the third is Harem Slave. And in these stories, you go into great detail, and you raise the level of awareness through these. They are works of fiction, but they're based in reality. So for the person who is looking for a statistical analysis, that's available on the web. If there's a person that wants to relate to a story that takes you from inception through the life of a trafficked individual, these 3 books would certainly be well worth your reading.
Thank you. Yes. Well, they've been very well received. At one point, Harem Slave actually reached number 7 in all fiction on Amazon, and it is now available also in French translation, Spanish translation, and German translation. They're all available on Amazon.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we give a direct link from our website right to that, and it will take you right up to the Harem Slave page, and from there you can order the other 2 books. You know, it's interesting that on your homepage you make very clear that human trafficking is the slave trade. That it's been outlawed everywhere, but in no time in history have there been more slaves.
Yeah.
It's quite a statement.
Well, it turns out that human trafficking is the second biggest crime in organized crime. The one being drug trafficking, and number 2 is human trafficking. Labor trafficking is actually more prevalent than sex slave trafficking. For example, in the fishing industries in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Thailand in particular, the fishing industry is rampant with slave trade. They promise people in poor countries like Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, wonderful high-paying jobs, and then when they get there, they kidnap them, keep them in cages, and make them work 20-hour days on the fishing ships. And if they don't cooperate, they just dump them overboard. I mean, it's the facilities for the World Cup that's coming up in Qatar are being built by slave labor. The conditions are so horrific that they have been averaging a death a day, and nobody knows anything about it. Nobody ever hears anything about it. Same idea. These people were recruited from poor countries like Nepal, Afghanistan, promises of wonderful wages, and everybody's thinking, yes, I'll be able to send money home to my family. They get there, they confiscate their travel documents, keep them locked up, make them work 18-hour days in 120-degree heat. Personally, I'm outraged. I thought that the human race had gone beyond this by now, but no, it's actually getting worse.
Well, it certainly is getting worse. It's growing at an alarming rate. What I want to make sure that people understand, though, is that human smuggling and human trafficking are not the same thing. So these ideas of these coyotes bringing over truckloads from the Mexican border, over the border has nothing to do with the kind of human trafficking we're talking about. That is human smuggling, a much different industry, still illegal, but this is not the industry we're talking about. We're talking specifically about human trafficking into the areas of prostitution and slave labor.
Right. Sometimes the smugglers are related to the traffickers because the smugglers will bring the people that they're smuggling to traffickers where they then are exploited. But you make a very good point that they are essentially different, but occasionally related.
Have you found in your travels and your discussions that people are woefully unaware of the extent of this process that will draw a runaway or draw an individual into this life? Certainly not anything they've done voluntarily, but that it does provide a certain safe haven for them, and they are they're not there voluntarily, they are a victim.
Yes, people are astonished that we're still even talking about this issue. Didn't we deal with this ages ago? And it's really hard to get through to them that it's more of a problem than it ever has been. There's often kind of a Venetian blind effect. You know, don't bother me with that. That's not an issue anymore. Well, people, it really is. And as you mentioned, runaways are at particular risk. What often happens, a girl is so severely abused at home that she gives up and she runs away.
Yes.
Within a day or two, a pimp finds her, abuses her even worse. Then she gets arrested for prostitution, and society treats her like she's the problem.
Yes.
Like she's the criminal, when actually she's the victim. We keep saying that prostitution is a victimless crime. It's not. The prostitutes themselves are the victims. Their lives, their dreams have been stolen. They're forced into doing things that they never would imagine doing on their own. I mean, how many girls do you know who say, oh, when I grow up, I want to be a prostitute? Right. I mean, it's a horrible, horrible life. And if they don't bring their pimp the $300 or $500 or even $1,000 a day quota, he beats them to a pulp in front of the other girls. As an example, I used to work with a friend who runs a center in Baltimore for girls that have been rescued from the street. And he says these poor girls never fully recover. They kind of sort of learn how to cope, but they never get over these traumatic experiences. And they have been lied to, deceived, betrayed so many times by so many people at a very impressionable age. They never learn to trust anybody, even people who are genuinely trying to help them. Sometimes, in fact, they are so suspicious that they actually go back to the streets because, in a certain grotesque sense, that's all they really know. And this really breaks my heart because you have destroyed somebody's entire life. And these predators don't care. All they care about is making a buck. And you can make a lot of money selling slave services. But what despicable people.
In your travels, have you lectured about this? Have you spoken out to organizations? Are you finding that the church is responsive to outreach in this particular area? Where are you finding your greatest success level?
Okay, well, that's a multi-pronged question. Yes, I have often spoken out. This interview today is my 490th
Okay.
radio interview, not only in the U.S., but also around the world. I have done many presentations to civic groups like Kiwanis, Rotary, and church groups. Religious organizations are often very active in trying to help victims of a crime if they are ever rescued, and also to help prevent the crime. One particularly valuable service is when there's a shelter provided for runaways, because pimps can spot a runaway at 50 yards. They troll bus stations and train stations looking for runaways that they can go up to and offer assistance. Oh, you need somewhere to stay? Come, I can help you with that. And on the way, let's get something to eat. They know all the buttons to push. These guys are professional predators, and you can't put a 13-year-old against a 45-year-old. It's just not an equal contest here. So I really especially appreciate the religious and other organizations that provide shelters for runaway teenagers, because it really helps prevent them being pulled into this horrible vortex from which there is virtually no escape.
Thank you, Nancy. From your experience, who do you find are the consumers of children being trafficked?
Oh, there seems to be a bottomless market for pedophilia. I have been horrified. The more I look into this, the more horrified I become. There's a whole dark internet devoted to pedophilia, and it's people you would never suspect. You remember the former spokesperson for Subway sandwiches?
Yes.
What was his name? Jared. Jared, yeah. He turns out to be a pedophile. Who knew? There are people walking around the grocery store just like everybody else, and apparently there's no cure for pedophilia. That there's once a guy has indulged in this, that they're hooked, and there's just a bottomless market for it. Turns out that more than half of the tourists who go to the Philippines and to Thailand are there for the sex trade, and most of those for pedophiles.
Yeah, it's just appalling to me. Certainly it was shocking, the expose that was done, the Academy Award winning movie, The Spotlight, which exposed how widespread pedophilia was, child molestation within the Catholic Church, that the person to your left or your right in the pew at church may very well be someone who is a customer.
Right.
There is no profile, there is no demographic, there is no indication as to who the consumer is in this particular case. We have politicians, businessmen, clergy who are engaged in this horrific attack on humanity. You offer a 5-day crash course on Human Trafficking 101 on your website, and yes. I want to encourage people to, as I prepared for this program today, and we're doing 4 hours live on human trafficking, hoping that we can bring to the audience a deeper, broader, wider understanding of the depth of the problem, that it knows no economic boundary, it knows no social boundary, and it knows no geographic boundary. It is universally engaged across the world, Smallville, USA to Los Angeles, from Sri Lanka to New Delhi. This is a problem that has been going on and involves millions upon millions of victims. That we have a war on drugs, we have a war on terror, but only behind the war on drugs in numbers is this epidemic of human trafficking. And the amount of time we spend talking about the war on terror, the amount of time we talk about the war on crime, the amount of time we talk about gun control, while all this is going on, the rampant abuse of children throughout the world is not being spoken of at the level that I believe, that the magnitude that it exists. So in your course you offer some understanding to the extent of the problem and various forms of modern day slavery, so you give them an education. You help them understand typical ways that traffickers operate, what happens to victims of human trafficking, and that's a two-parter. Because there's a lot of different outcomes, a lot of different scenarios. Earlier today I had Tawan McCarty on with me, who is the head of the Well House, founded the Well House organization here in Birmingham, Alabama. They've saved over 400 women from trafficking just in the local market, are building homes for them, halfway houses and transition homes. They just bought 65 acres of property in which to build multiple dwellings so that these girls can get far enough away to begin to get the help that they need. And then on day 5 you cover what can we do and how do we protect our children. And this is a 5-day free crash course that you download from your website.
Yeah. Like you say, it's perfectly free. All we need is your email, and it's yours. And you're free to forward it to anybody you know. We're just trying to help educate people about this problem and what we can do about it. So please download it and then send it to everybody you know.
Okay, well, you can find that at nancyhartwell.com. That's Nancy, Nancy, Hartwell, HARTWELL.com. And in the upper right-hand corner of her homepage are, it looks like handcuffs of a sort, and it says, Save Our Children, download my free 5-day crash course, Human Trafficking 101. And I want to encourage each and every one of you. You've heard now the testimonies of 2 individuals, one who came out of trafficking. She was trafficked at age 15, and she was able to break away from it. She now has 2 master's degrees, involved in social services, has founded an organization that empowers and helps to get young women out of this. Nancy, are you do you have a robust speaking engagements where you are educating people and making them aware about this? Where can people find out, other than the website, where might they be able to hear you speak?
Well, I actually have 3 book signings lined up. I live in Tampa, and I have one the end of January and then 2 in February at local venues. And I also have a steady stream of radio interviews. So
wonderful.
Yes. Let me talk for a second about back to pedophilia.
Okay. if you're going to just give me a second, because we're about to go to break, and I want to pick that up with you when we return. We've been talking to Nancy J. Hartwell of nancyhartwell.com, author of Harem's Slave, as well as 2 other books where she fictionalizes the real life stories of 3 young women and the impact that being victims of human trafficking. In this time of human trafficking awareness, we're trying to bring this global problem to the forefront of our viewers' minds. So when we return from the break right here on Revealing the Truth on the Igniting a Nation Broadcast Network, we're going to join back with Nancy as she tells us more about this pressing global issue. We'll be right back.
Will you be able to live stream our programs, but you'll be able to go back and check out old programs as well. Just check out the TV Archives tab on our homepage. Missed any of Rabbi's rants? You can check out and catch up on all of those there as well. So many of you have been asking about our past teachings, such as the Torah teachings, the Jewish roots and history classes, as well as the prophecy and the news clips. Well, you can go back and research all of those there on the website as well. So check out ianbn.com for more. In addition, we will have a newsletter regarding any of our special guests that we have here in the studio, as well as more materials. Check it out and you won't regret it. If you'd like to join our conversation further here at the Igniting a Nation Broadcasting Network, check us out and use hashtag Igniting a Nation, as well as Revealing the Truth on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
This is the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of Revealing the Truth, right here on the Igniting a Nation Broadcasting Network, inviting you to join me every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday for our prophecy and the news classes. Each week I take the headlines from around the world that have a biblical connection and present them in a way that brings the news and the Bible to life. There are over 2,500 prophecies in the Bible, and there are so few classes available to see how they connect with world events. We cover everything from Islamic terrorism to the changing relationships between Russia, Turkey, Iran, Syria, and Israel. Prophecy is unfolding before our very eyes, and to many, it is complicated and hard to understand. In just 1 hour each week, you'll be given the tools and the biblical connection to world events. With so much going on and so few reliable sources of news, I encourage you to join me every Monday night at 7 o'clock p.m. at St. Mark United Methodist Church in Northport, every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at Beechwood Baptist Church in Mount Olive, and every Thursday night at 7 p.m. at Mountain Chapel United Methodist Church in Vestavia. If you want to make sense out of what's happened in the world around you, this is the class for you. All are welcome. Times and location addresses can be found on our website at ianbn.com. I hope to see you there. Shalom.
Igniting a Nation Ministries is devoted to spreading the message of the gospel to as many people as possible. And like many ministries, we need funding to keep going. Your contributions are greatly appreciated, and we want to be able to send you some of the resources that we've been creating here at Igniting a Nation. We will be presenting you with special offers throughout the month, and I'm excited to share our first special offer with you. During the month of January, Rabbi Eric will be sending you 2 of his many titles with a contribution of $50 or more. This is a fully tax-deductible contribution to Igniting a Nation. You will receive a signed copy of Rabbi Eric's latest biblical thriller, The Codist, which discusses maybe some of the options Satan is taking in our modern age to disrupt our relationship with God. In addition, you will receive a signed copy of Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. This Bible study has remained in the top 100 best-selling Messianic titles for 5 straight years. Everyone from small groups at churches all across the world to inmates in women's prisons have been using this Bible study, and through it, lives are being changed. Your gift of $50 or more should be made payable to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. Make sure to mark in the memo section offer number 2017-1. Visit our website, ianbn.com, to see the entire list of books available through our partnership with Amazon.
Welcome back into Revealing the Truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker. We're joined today via a remote connection to Tampa, Florida, with Nancy Hartwell of nancyhartwell.com. Nancy is an activist, an author on the subject of human trafficking, and has made available on her website at nancyhartwell.com Save Our Children. Download her free 5-day crash course on Human Trafficking 101. So as we rejoin you, Nancy, I was fascinated and interesting to hear what prompted your story, that you actually had a friend disappear, and not knowing what happened to her, beginning to become aware of what could have possibly happened. I'm sure that the impact on her parents was devastating.
I mean, it's almost better to know that your child has died than being left in uncertainty for year after year after year, or knowing that they have a living death, completely cut off from the world, no internet, no telephone, completely isolated, completely controlled. You become just a piece of meat at the total mercy of whoever it is who controls you, and it's just a horrible, horrible life.
Well, what can parents do? Obviously, this is a problem that originates with either the child being abused by a parent, a close relative, or a trusted member of the community, a teacher, a friend, a pastor, a priest, someone in their life. And what should parents be on the lookout for? Because most of these children who in their later years have come out and told their stories have said that either one, they didn't see anything wrong with it, or two, they were made to fear repercussions in case they had told what happened to them.
Yes.
What can parents do?
Very often it starts with abuse, either at home or from an acquaintance or other family member. Parents need to look for signs of abuse. Sometimes the children usually the children have been threatened that if they tell anybody that there will be dire consequences, so they're scared to death to say anything. But there are still signs that you can look for, like blood in their private parts, or when they manifest fear anytime a particular person shows up. Parents need to be able to ask a few questions very gently to see if there's a good reason why they're afraid of this particular person. Also, parents need to be very alert. There are predators that pretend to be other children on the other end of online video games.
Yes.
And they need to warn their kids, look, if this other person starts asking you to send them pictures, especially pictures without any clothes on, be sure to tell mommy or daddy right away, because that's not normal. And you should never send a picture of yourself without any clothes on anywhere. By the way, girls, no matter how much he says he loves you, do not send a picture of yourself to anybody that you would not like to see on the front page of a newspaper. When you're 14, it might not seem very important, but if you know anybody who's ever broken up with a boyfriend, just think, 30 years from now, maybe you want to run for mayor. And guess what? That guy is still going to have that picture. And he could blackmail you, and you don't want to deal with that. So please do not send compromising pictures of yourself to anybody ever. Now, parents, be alert that sometimes pedophiles will go to elementary schools when they're letting out, and they'll try to find a child that has a name embroidered on like a baseball cap or on a book bag. So they'll go up and say, oh, Billy, listen, your mom couldn't make it here today, so she sent me to pick you up. Now, if you have a family password, which is a great idea, Billy says, okay, so what's the password? And if the guy doesn't know it, Billy knows he's not supposed to leave with that guy, okay? This is very easy to set up. Just make it a simple word that a child would have an easy time remembering, maybe the name of a pet or something very easy, or the home address or something, but set up a family password. This is very effective, especially to help with young children. Also, talk to your children about this. We tell them to be careful when they're crossing the street because they might get hit by a car. We tell them to be careful around the stove because they might get burned. But then we're scared to tell them, be careful around people you don't know because you might get kidnapped. We don't want to traumatize them. We're simply trying to teach them life skills, important life skills that can save their lives. If we don't tell them what the problem is, they're not going to be prepared to be alert to what the issues are. Now, we tell people not to talk to strangers, but we don't always explain why. And the predators have all kinds of sneaky ways that they get around talking to strangers. For instance, they'll bring a puppy. Well, what child doesn't love puppies? And so they strike up a conversation while the child is petting the puppy. Or they'll say, oh, my puppy got lost in those woods over there. Can you help me find my puppy? Well, we raise our children to be helpful, to be kind. And of course, the child is going to want to help this person, even though it's a stranger. Look for the puppy. Sometimes they'll bring a puppy to a playground. There's even on YouTube, there's something I saw that scared me. This 30-year-something clean-cut white guy goes through a playground with a cute dog, and he goes to the parents and says, have you told your kids not to talk to strangers? And the parent, oh, of course. He says, do you mind if I try an experiment? Which one is your kid? Okay, mine's a little girl with the red shirt over there. So he takes the dog, goes over there, strikes up a conversation, and says, would you like to see more puppies? I have more puppies. And so the child leaves with him, holding his hand, skipping along beside him happily. I mean, this is not our picture of a kidnapping, right? I mean,
correct.
The child is delighted to go with him. Then he takes the child back to the parent, and the parents are like, oh my God. And it worked every single time. These were children who were 6, 7, 8 years old, and it worked every single time. So parents, please be aware of that and tell your kids, even if somebody has a dog, it doesn't mean that they're a nice person. Sometimes they even work in pairs. One will set up a problem, and then the other will heroically step in to resolve it. Have you ever told your kids not to talk to heroes? For example, a girl's on a bus. One predator decides she's the target, so he sits next to her, and he starts groping her. She gets mad. He gropes her again. So then this hero on the other side of the bus comes in and says, look, you keep your hands off of that kid. Hey, you come and sit next to me. Well, suddenly he's a hero. He has broken the stranger barrier, and within seconds he can extract from her all the information he needs, where she's going, if somebody's going to be there to pick her up, because suddenly she's not afraid to talk to him. But the whole thing was a setup. So, I mean, these guys know what works. So, and if parents don't warn kids about this, kids don't know. They won't ever guess what's going on. And parents also, please monitor your kids' social media sites. You can't be the ugly policeman who ruins somebody's life, but if you do it with them, you can turn it into an educational experience, show them pictures that never in a million years would have been posted on the internet, or postings that have a bunch of red flags, like ads for models, or a part in a movie, or a hit new band that promise lavish money. This is the kind of thing that attracts 13, 14, 15-year-old girls, and those are the ones they're principally looking for. Especially if it says, be sure not to tell anybody about this. This is going to be a big surprise for your family. That's for sure. Disappear. Now, also, girls, if you ever have to respond to one of these ads, and please don't, because they're 90% of them are setups, tell somebody where you're going. Take somebody with you. Because one of the questions that they'll ask is, do you have time to sit down and chat for a few minutes, or is somebody waiting for you? What they're really asking is, have you come alone and unprotected? And if you say, oh, my father, the karate instructor, is waiting for me downstairs, guess what? The interview will be very brief, and you'll be safely returned to your family. If you say, oh, that's okay, there's no problem, nobody's waiting, they will sit and chat with you for a few minutes, put you completely at ease. Maybe take a staged call to make it look like he's doing a casting of a remake of a big Hollywood film or something. Whatever would impress a 14-year-old.
So what it is you're saying, Nancy, is that it requires active parenting. It requires a foundation when a child is young of establishing the boundaries, the foundation of understanding that not everyone can be trusted, not to put the fear of everyone in them, but to make them aware, to be involved and engaged in your family. And certainly we strongly recommend that there is less incidence of this happening when children are involved in their church youth groups, when families are involved in a strong faith-based community, when the families themselves are going to church together and involved, engaged together. They know who the friends are, they know who the families are. This is something that we strongly here at Revealing the Truth believe in. It's a very foundation of our existence is standing on the Word of God. Train up a child in the way they should go, and when they grow older, when they grow into those teenage years, when they become more desirable targets for the traffickers, that they will have the wisdom and the equipment and the knowledge as to how to counter this, and that they have a family that trusts them and that they trust themselves. Nancy, in your travels, have you had the opportunity to sit down with women who have been able to extract themselves from human trafficking and have them share their stories with you?
Yes, and they're heartbreaking stories.
Is there one in particular that kind of stands out in your mind that you might be able to share with our audience to kind of give them a feel as to how this really happens? Not from an academic standpoint, but from a real live situation standpoint.
There are two that are particularly moving. one, I used to live in Cameroon, and so I learned about one girl who was sold by her uncle when she was 9 years old to a family in Pennsylvania. She was sold for $2,000. She slept on a towel on the floor. She was their family maid. She was not allowed to go to school. And finally, after 3 years, she had actually seen a television show about human trafficking, and she thought, hey, that's what happened to me. And she managed to get to a neighbor's house, and then the police were called, and she was released and finally managed to get to school. Now she has a master's degree. She has actually met President Obama and is now an activist against this this whole crime. The other one who stands out was a runaway at age 12. She was forced into prostitution. She spent 2 years naked, locked up in one room. She also finally managed to escape and is also now an activist. She still has a lot of psychological problems to this very day, and she's now in her 30s. Because, like I said earlier, you never completely recover from this, you just learn how to cope. But she is now also an activist and tries to help girls who have been forced onto the streets and help rescue them. These are heart-wrenching stories, but at least both of them have had relatively happy endings.
Well, thank you for sharing that. There's one more topic that falls under this category that most people do not put in this category, but interestingly enough, it happens to be the second component of your ministry, if you will, or your message, and that is women in slavery under Islamic law.
Oh.
And when we look at human trafficking over here, which is the forced to live under conditions which are not of your own choosing, that you may be beaten, corrected, scolded, abused by not following explicit orders or performing a certain way, there are tenets within Islam which mirror that exact same issue, and it is an area under which you do speak about.
Yes.
So we have about, maybe 7 minutes left in this segment, and I wonder if you would mind sharing just a few things so that people can see some of the correlations. If we're over here looking at human trafficking and saying what deplorable situation these women must have to live in, how horrific is it that they have no choice and have no self-destination or determination in their lives, how does that parallel with what the Quran and Islamic law has to say about the treatment of women?
Okay, this is a hot a hot topic.
That's why I'm here.
We have been trying hard to improve our relations with the Arab world, but this is a sticking issue that just won't go away, and it's not very pretty. Under Islamic law, slavery is still entirely legal. And the Quran was written in the years 620 something, and when society was a very different place. But this is considered to be the ultimate revelation of God, and if you're Muslim, then you take the Quran very, very literally, and slavery is entirely legal.
Yes.
King Faisal in Saudi Arabia issued a decree in 1962 outlawing slavery, but since human law can never supersede divine law, that was basically just for international consumption and had very, very little legal effect. And wherever Sharia or Islamic law is the predominant law, slavery is legal. And this covers most of the countries of the Persian Gulf and some of the other conservative Islamic states around the world. And like one of the biggest roads in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia is Slave Market Street. I mean, it's not hidden at all. This is a perfectly acceptable way of life. And now Islam also is very, very anti-female. They even say, well, you know, woman was created from Adam's rib, but a rib is crooked, so women are born with a crooked character. They lead very, very, very restricted lives under conservative Islam. Like in Saudi Arabia, women are still not even allowed to drive. There's mounting protests against this, but women are still not allowed to drive. There's no law against it, but if the religious police find a woman driving, she will be beaten and perhaps even imprisoned. The late King Abdullah has 4 daughters who are still under house arrest because they were proponents of women's rights. Women in general have very few rights under Islam. If you're not Muslim, you're even farther down on the social ladder, and if you're a slave, you're even farther down. So basically you're treated like a piece of meat. There is a link on one of the days of my course about slavery of a picture of a Filipina maid in a Saudi home who one morning served the coffee late. They poured boiling water all over her. She has second-degree burns all over her because she served the coffee late. Now this is, I was surprised this picture ever made it out because it is such a vivid image of the position of women servants, especially in Saudi Arabia. There are recruiters who go to the Philippines, to a lot of other Asian countries, and try to recruit maids for wealthy households on the Gulf. They sign legitimate labor contracts. They pay for their ticket there. And then as soon as they get there, they tear up the contract, confiscate their passport, cut them off from the rest of the world, and there they are stuck. It got to be so bad that now the Philippines won't even let a woman travel alone from the Philippines to anymore because it just became such a common issue. Yes, slavery is totally legal in much of the Muslim world, and some of the brothels and harems, some of the brothels are so brutal that life expectancy is calculated in weeks. You're completely cut off. You have no way of telling your family or your friends where you are or what has happened to you, and you are completely at the mercy of whoever it is who owns the harem or the brothel. It's just a horrible way to spend a life, to waste a precious human life.
Well, we've been talking with Nancy Hartwell about human trafficking. Added component is the oppression of women living in Muslim countries. The numbers are staggering. When you add the Islamic component to it, we're talking about in excess of 1 billion women, children involved in some type of oppression, some type of slavery, some type of servitude, not of their choice. So in America, we have become complacent. 600,000 to 800,000 women, really children, teenagers, trafficked across America. Across the world, it is in the millions, 30 to 50 million. And when you add the oppression of women under Sharia law, it approaches the 1 billion number. This is a huge issue. It is a global problem. And if you'll visit nancyhartwell.com, she has a free course for you that you download. And if you're interested in one of her books, Harem Slave, or any of the other 2 books, where she actually takes you on a journey into the lives of Prince Ibrahim's favorite, or Voices from the Harem, are part of the Harem series, the Human Trafficking series. She brings a great deal of light to it. They're very popular books, bestsellers on Amazon, all 3 of them. You can get to them from our Books and Media page. Nancy, it's been a pleasure having you here on Revealing the Truth. I hope you'll post our link on your Facebook page, and we'll be able to send some folks your way. Again, that's nancyhartwell.com, and you are very welcome to return with us to Revealing the Truth here on the Igniting a Nation Broadcasting Network. Hope you have a great day. Thank you for being on the program with us. Nancy Hartwell at nancyhartwell.com. We'll be right back.